Hi everyone, welcome to the Atman Show. And today I have a very special guest, Subhash Kak, and we are going to talk about Lalitaditya Muktapeed, ancient Kashmir. And go ahead and describe, actually give a brief introduction before we begin our question answer session.
Okay, Lalitaditya Muktapid was a very famous king or emperor of Kashmir who not only ruled over Kashmir, but he also conquered most of India as well as parts of Central Asia. So he's been called a world conqueror, and he created a lot of amazing architectural marvels, including the famous temple, the Martanda temple in Anantnag in Kashmir, which is right now in ruins, but it's in a situation which can be fixed. And I think I have been always urging the government of India and the Archaeological Survey of India to try to renovate that temple. But he was a very great king, because unlike most Indian kings who have been quite content with staying within the boundaries of India, excepting Rajendra Chola from Tamil Nadu, who also conquered parts of Southeast Asia. So Lalitaditya was like him, but before him by 200 years or 250 years, who went out into Central Asia and parts of Afghanistan, etc. And most of India, wonderful thing. He should be known better than is the case right now.
Okay. So we don't find his reference in the history books, is it? Or maybe I didn't study properly.
No, I think it's sad that what has been happening in Indian history books. They've been repeating the same story, about five, six kings from the so-called ancient era, then a few kings, the Mughal kings, etc., etc. So they left out some of the greatest kings and rulers of India, including also, and we have spoken about it earlier, Bhoj Parmar, who
Yeah.
ruled for a long, long time, who was the author of 84 books. Can you imagine? And
Yeah.
his books also included robotics and machines and poetry. So why aren't we told about him? Sad, it's our fault.
So yeah, we will tell our viewers through this channel.
Right.
Okay. Lalita Aditya was the era before Ghaznavi actually invaded and things like that. So can you talk about the whole era till like how was Kashmir in general?
Kashmir for about 1500 years, from centuries BCE, before Christ, before Common Era, maybe 400 BCE onwards until about 1330, was a very secure and powerful kingdom. And from time to time, they projected their power beyond the boundaries of the Kashmir Valley. Now, right before Lalitaditya, the area of Afghanistan was ruled by Turkic Shahis. These were of uh, Turkish ancestry or race, and their kingdom in Afghanistan was called Shahi Kingdom. And after Lalitaditya came along, because he was such a powerful king, and his own personal story is very interesting. His father was the same dynasty, which is called the Karkot dynasty, and his father's name was Durlabhak. And his mother was the second wife of his father, and she had already been married to somebody else, to a prince, etc. It also tells you that society was much more liberal,
Liberal.
open. So
Mm.
she was already married, and I don't know what happened to her first husband. He was a merchant. A foreign merchant in Kashmir, and he either died or they got divorced. Then she married her husband Durlabak, who was Lalitaditya's father, and he was the third son. And both his older brothers preceded him as kings. So now what he did, he became the king about 724. And what he did was, when he went westwards, he also formed an alliance with the Shahis. And they, after being the so-called Turkic Shahis before that. After that, they became the Hindu Shahis. So Afghanistan remained a very powerful center of Hinduism. It was one of, powerful places where Hinduism prospered until he was defeated about 1000. When the Ghaznavi attacks came, it was at that time, I forget the name of the Hindu Shahi king, Jayapal or Anandapal or somebody. And at that time, 1000 or around it actually 1016. Just before that, there was a queen in Kashmir named Didda, who ruled for almost 60 years. And she was herself not a Kashmiri. Kashmir it's really, we look at it as in ethnic terms right now. There were people from different communities outside of Kashmir as well. And she belonged to what is called the Lohar family or dynasty, which is from the Jammu region. So she was a very powerful monarch of Kashmir for about 60 years. Sometimes she ruled in the name of her husband, sometimes in the name of her son who was young, then in the name of her grandson, and then she ruled herself. And it was soon afterwards that the Hindu Shahis of Afghanistan were defeated. And that's when the Islamic region or era on the borderlands of India, because in the beginning, Ghaznavi or Ghazni, Mahmud of Ghazni conquered Punjab and those regions. And of course, he also attacked Somnath, which is in Gujarat. But before that, there used to be attacks by the Turkic people from time to time into India, but the Turks were not Muslim at that time. The religion of the Turks themselves, including of Genghis Khan, who came later, was called, they were either Buddhists or they also had Hindu worship, the Turks themselves, or they followed their own Mongolian religion called Tengri, where they worship the heavens, the sky, which is not unlike Hinduism, if you look at it from a certain perspective. So when the Turks would come in, and why did they have to come in? Because India was the richest land. And in Central Asia is steppe land, not that much of crops. And so they wanted to go to the richest land of the country, of the world. And that's why from time to time, when their own population would multiply, if they had peace, then they needed to go to some other land. And what was the other land was India. And so prior to Lalitaditya, there were centuries of strife. Foreign Turkic or Hunnite kings from time to time came down and they battled kings of North India, including the Gupta, the great Gupta Empire. But eventually they were defeated. And Kashmir was sort of spared for a long time because Kashmir had very powerful defenses. It's not so easy to enter Kashmir. All that Kashmir had to do was to protect the passes, the high mountain passes. Kashmir Valley is ringed by very tall mountains. There are only 3 or 4 passes through which you can cross over. And the Kashmir kingdom were used to protecting those passes. So Kashmir was rather spared. And Kashmir was also spared, even Ghaznavi could not conquer Kashmir. And what happened later on, the Muslim era began, I think, 1340. What happened before that, a lot of the pre-Islamic kingdoms in Central Asia were conquered. In fact, including what is now called Xinjiang in Central Asia. There are cities like Khotan or Kashgar and Yarkand and so on. They were Buddhist or part Buddhist, part Hindu. And they had Sanskritic names, their kings. Now that collapsed in 1006. So they were conquered. And most of their monuments were destroyed. But before they were conquered, the kings, they knew that this was going to come. What they did was they took all their books and buried them in caves. And they remained protected in caves until about 120 years ago when they were discovered. And that's when the history of Central Asia was revealed once again, and how much of an influence India had via Kashmir, because Central Asia or Xinjiang next to Kashmir, just over the Himalayas. So Kashmiris and Kashmiri kings have played a very, very important role in spreading Indian culture to both China and Japan over the mountains, over Himalayas, and also to Europe. So the projection of power was best exemplified by Lalitaditya himself, because he not only went south of Kashmir, but he also went north. And another great thing which we should not forget about Kashmir is that two of the greatest universities in all of India, west of Banaras or west of Kashi, were Takshashila, which is um, which is near Peshawar or somewhere, in Punjab and Pakistan. Taxila is a city now called, and 200 miles north of that was Sharda,
Mm-hmm.
and Sharda was on the western edge of Kashmir Valley. So
Mm-hmm.
Sharda has been a very powerful university which has influenced India for a long time, because Kashmir had a great tradition of scholarship, of literature, poetry, drama, medicine, including, Charak Samhita, one of the two great texts of Ayurveda. The other is Sushrut Samhita.
Shruta, Shushruta.
Yeah. Sushrut or Sushruta or Sushrut, and Charak.
Mhm.
Charak was a Kashmiri.
Okay.
And then Patanjali, what has changed the world in the
Mhm.
last 60 years? It's yoga, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yoga has changed the world. Go to any corner of the world, people are doing yoga.
Mhm.
And Patanjali, the author of the Yoga Sutras, was a Kashmiri. So
Okay.
Kashmir has played a great influence over the world.
Yeah.
And how do we know it? Because Patanjali was also the author of a commentary on Panini's great grammar, Ashtadhyayi, and his commentary is called Mahabhashya, meaning Maha, meaning great, Bhashya means commentary. And in that commentary, because it's in prose, it's very long, he also talks about various geographical places, and he talks about specific villages which are located in Kashmir Valley. So he knew Kashmir Valley very, very intimately, from where you conclude that he was a Kashmiri. So, to come back to your question, before Mahmud of Ghazni, um, Kashmir was a secure kingdom, devoted. Of course, they used to have a lot of um, fighting within, one king fighting another, as is been the case, or as happens all the time. For example, right now in the US, there is Biden fighting Trump, and there are 91 cases against Trump, all kinds of cases. Hey, why did you take these papers? Why did you do this to this woman? So they give $86 million to the woman without any proof, etc., etc. So all this drama also used to play out.
Yeah, yeah.
And we
Politics.
have politics. And we have stories of that drama in this great history called Rajatarangini,
Mm-hmm.
which was written, I think, in 1150 or so. So for Rajatarangini, Kalhan was the author.
Mm-hmm.
Kalhan is the upbranch of Kalyan. Sanskrit Kalyan, upbranch meaning the common usage becomes Kalhan. So Kalhan was, well, about 400 years after Lalitaditya, but people remember his very story very well. And in fact, when Al-Biruni came with Ghaznavi,
Mm-hmm.
when he came to India, he found that he was not able to come to Kashmir, but Punjab, etc. They found that people used to celebrate, or he heard, the second of the month of Chaitra as the great victory date or victory day of the Emperor Muktapir, which is Lalitaditya Muktapir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you talk about Al-Biruni. I had heard somewhere, actually read somewhere that he came to Somnath Mandir temple, and then he saw the richness of the Somnath temple, and he went and told to Ghaznavi, and that is when he came to Somnath and destroyed and took all the wealth. Is that something true?
No, I don't think Al-Biruni came before. He
Mhm.
was a part of the whole retinue
Okay.
of Mahmud of Ghazni. So Ghazni, he had all the army, all these tribesmen from Central Asia, from Afghanistan, attracted by the stories of all the riches of India. So
Mhm.
every summer, because Afghanistan was barren as it is now, so as the winter would recede, now these guys would get on their horses, and their objective was to loot the temples of India. India was so rich, the world's richest country, and the temples were fabulously rich.
Mhm.
So their objective was to, and in North India, there is no physical obstruction.
Mhm.
From Punjab all the way to Bengal, it's all flat. The Indo-Gangetic plain, all flat. So all that they had to do, and as India was a decentralized polity, there used to be kings, etc., but they were like local rulers. And then there used to be an emperor at the top, like in the Gupta Empire, right, from time to time. But India was not a military place. Indians were more devoted, as the name of India goes. The name of India is Bharat.
Mhm.
Bha means light, Rat means absorbed.
Mhm.
It's the land of people who are absorbed in light or absorbed in wisdom. So
Mhm.
most Indians, they are quite happy to be doing whatever they are doing themselves, as is the case even now.
Yeah.
If you go to Europe or America, why are Indians so successful? Because they're not fighting any other community or group. They're not trying to convert anybody, or
Mhm.
they're not trying to project their power. They
Yeah.
just want to be left alone, and they want everybody else to be left alone.
Yeah.
But that was not the case after the rise of Islam, because India was so rich and Afghanistan and Central Asia were so poor that for them, the magnet of all the wealth of these great temples, it's like the Tirupati temple right now,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
huge wealth. So you had the Somnath temple, you
Mhm.
had Sharada, but Sharada was protected. Or you had temples in Punjab, which were all destroyed. All the temples in North India were destroyed, including the Babri Masjid, the Ayodhya temple before, or the Kashi Vishwanath temple, or the Krishna Janmasthan. So basically, it was just okay, what can we get?
Mhm.
So it is just greed. It was a political thing. Destroy the temple and then put our mosque there, and then, but basically what they did was, according to estimates, India's share of the world economy about the time of Ghaznavi was 34%.
Yeah.
Huge. Of the whole world,
Of the whole
34%.
world. Mhm.
And in the 700 years of warfare in India, after the Muslims came and stole the wealth, it
And
had
the
dropped to
Britishers,
it
they
dropped
also,
to 20%,
yeah.
20% during the 700 years.
Mm.
And the Britishers in 120 years brought it down from 20% to 2%,
Yeah.
because they systematically, because earlier during the Mughals, they were here, so they were not actually taking the money out. But
Mm.
when the British came, they took the money physically out to England. And they
Yeah.
also, after they gave independence to India, then they also needed people.
Mm.
So then they also brought in some people initially as workers, but now those guys are now in the ruling class, like
Mm.
Rishi Sunak himself, right?
But he came from Africa, I guess, right?
But
Yeah.
Indians were also
Yeah.
via Africa, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, one thing I want to ask, right? These people say, "Oh, let's go to Europe and London," and they're like very fancy about it, but actually it is built out of India's money. Do you think you validate this comment?
Certainly, England's wealth, it's estimated that they stole $45 trillion worth of wealth from India.
Mm.
And basically, what did they do? They didn't steal it. They didn't rob temples. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
didn't. They didn't behead people. They didn't rob temples. What they did was, uh, early 19th century industrial revolution was taking place. Before that, they had tariffs,
Mhm.
because India was the greatest country for textiles, and
Mhm.
textiles was one of the biggest industries in the pre-modern world.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was why India was so rich. So they had tariffs. They wanted to protect their own factories. But the moment industrial revolution took place, now they could produce them cheaper. And since they controlled India, so they made India a place where they could sell or dump their products. Do you see that? And then they taxed Indian products. So Indian textile industry collapsed. So this is how indirectly, through their policies and their taxation also, this transfer of wealth took place. And Europe, the
Also,
rest.
like they had some policies where, the Bengal famine happened and many people, millions of people died because of hunger.
Oh, absolutely. There is a very famous book by an American or English author. It's called Late Victorian Holocaust. The author just died a month or 2 months ago. I forget the name of the author. So he shows that in the second part of the 19th century, 1840s onwards, there were 6 or 7. The Bengal famine occurred in 1940s, right? Because Churchill wanted food to be diverted for their army. And so people died in Bengal, several million, 6, 7. But before that, in the 19th century, there were 6 or 7 famines. And it's estimated that maybe 50 to 100 million people died before they should have died, because it was truly horrific. So India was devastated economically during the British times.
Like, see, from 34% the richest country and all the way that you don't even have food to eat.
2% in 1918, and when they left, maybe it was close to 3%. And now India has become very powerful. It's only 9%. Now India is 9%, but India is expected to become the world's richest country once again in the next 10, 15, 25. Certainly, there is a paper from Goldman Sachs which says that in 2075, India would be near the first economy in the world. It'll be maybe India, China, USA. Because China has a big problem. And what's China's big problem?
Right
China's
now,
current
China is quite big, right?
it's very big. Right now, it's different depending on how you measure it. US, China, and India, or China, US, and India.
Yeah.
But the Chinese big problem is that China is expected to lose 600 to 800 million people in the next 80 years. See, right now, China's population is 1.4 billion. But by 2100, it'll be only 600 to 800 million, which means its population will become 1/2 of what it is now. And as the population plummets, and why is it going down? Because of fertility. The fertility has collapsed in most parts of the world, but Asian countries, it's collapsed much more dramatically than in
But
Europe.
not in India, it's increasing.
India has also now reached the replacement level. So
Okay.
right now it's going up only in Afghanistan, China, Middle East, and Africa. Everywhere else, the populations are going down. And so it's the collapse of the fertility rate. And why are people not having babies? Because jobs are disappearing. Now you have machines doing everything. You don't need
AI.
travel. You don't need.
Elon Musk recently shared a video on Twitter showing Tesla's Optimus Bot, a humanoid robot folding laundry. This demonstration is part of Tesla's ongoing development of Optimus, initially unveiled in 2021. The robot is designed for tasks that are unsafe, repetitive, or boring for humans.
Travel agents, the computer does your bookings, right? You don't need to store information. Well, there are some app that will store the information for you. You don't need judgment. You'll have self-driving cars very soon. So why do you need even drivers? So people know this, that jobs are disappearing. So a lot of people, and then raising children has become so expensive. If you do have a child, a young child, you want to send them to a daycare in an American city, it could cost you $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. A lot of people don't have that kind of income. There are a lot of, there are a lot of very rich Americans, but most Americans are not very rich. Most Americans barely are able to keep up with all their payments, etc. And therefore, even if they wanted to have children, they can't afford to. And the same thing is happening elsewhere. And then women are also working. So, it's a complicated social scene.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about next question. can you talk about the cities and temple he built, especially the Sun Temple Martin, like something in detail, like how the education went and how and finally how it was destroyed.
Martand temple, of pictures of which you can see on the internet. Um, Martand is another name for the sun, and the etymology of Martand is Mrit. Mrit means dead.
Mhm.
And means egg.
Mhm.
So son born out of a dead egg. That's why that's another name for Martand.
Okay.
Okay, for the sun. It's a Sanskrit word.
Okay.
So it was one of the great sun temples, and there was also a great sun temple in Multan
Mhm.
in current day Sindh, I believe. These were the great temples, when the Afghans or the Turks would come down the passes. Two of the great temples were Multan Temple and Mulistan. The original name for Multan is Mulistan, the original place, and then the great Sun Temple of Kashmir. So they were, how was Kashmir's society organized? Uh, for that, you have to look at how does an economy work? How does the current day economy work? You look at the US. Uh, One third of US economy is the medical system, healthcare. So a lot of people in every town are doctors or nurses or the other staff. So those days, of course, you had vaidyas, doctors, etc. But a lot of economy was pilgrimage or yatra. And so these temples were magnets for the activity because people travel. It's like the Ayodhya temple. It's
Yeah,
going to be a
now
great
lot of pilgrimage will tourists
pilgrimage.
will
Oh,
get
absolutely.
attracted.
So there'll be hotels coming up, 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, etc., etc. And then there will be shopkeepers coming in, there are business people coming in. So in the pre-modern world, even in Europe, you had the great cathedrals. So these uh, religious centers were centers which provided or anchors to the local economy, or it could be long range economy as well. So every great king would also build great temples.
Mhm.
And there are many that Lalitaditya built, and Martand was one of them. Now, after Lalitaditya, his son, I think another king who ruled for a long time was called Jayapid. He ruled for 31 years. Lalitaditya himself ruled for 36 years, according to Kalhan. But if you look at the chronology, it appears that he may have ruled for only 33 years. Kalhan was also, after 400 years, you're trying to have your notes, you're looking at your various records, and he could have made a mistake when he said 36 years.
Okay. So you said that there were Hindu Shahi kings from so it present day Turkey, right? Are you talking about?
No, no, no. Turkey, the present day Turkey was not Turkish area at all. Did you know that?
No, no. What was it? Yeah, actually, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Turkey, the western part of Turkey, which is towards Greece, were Greek people.
Uh-huh.
And before that, on the other side, were, Armenians and other people who were all Christian. There were
Okay.
no Turkish people in Turkey.
Okay.
So when the Turkish tribe, the original homeland of the Turkic tribes was northern Asia towards Mongolia.
Okay.
So they came down, and part of them, of course, they conquered Central Asia because Central Asia before that had an Indian element,
Mm-hmm.
as I told you in Khotan. Then they came through the passes and came to India. And the language of the camp, the word for camp in Turkish language is Urdu,
Mm-hmm.
or in English, you write it as HORDE,
Mm-hmm.
which is the military camp. So Urdu was the language, or which was really Hindustani, became the language of the camp. Now, the Turks pushed further westwards,
Okay.
and they came into present-day Turkey.
Okay.
And through military rule, they were able to either, it's like how Pakistan has become entirely non-Hindu, or Afghanistan is non-Hindu. So slowly Turkey became non-Christian, but it was all originally Christian, or before that it was Greek religion. And the interesting story is that they had a custom which is called Devi Sharme, because they needed soldiers. And the Turks themselves were a minority in Turkey at that time. That is Turkish speaking people. So what they would do is every 4 years, they would send their military to Greek villages or Bulgarian villages and take these boys from these Greek villages, bring them to Turkey, and raise them in camps and make them learn Turkish language. So that's how many Turks now in Turkey, or Turkiye they call themselves, look Greek, but they don't know that this is how they became Greek. They were abducted. These boys used to be abducted and made a part of their army. And they were good soldiers. They were called Janissaries. So it's a very interesting story. I have written on it on the Medium, and you might want to read it. It's called The Age of Slavery, where all this story is given.
Okay, yeah, we can do that one. This sounds interesting. Yeah, you can send me the link. I'll read it. Okay, so let's go. Can you talk about Lalita Aditya's conquest from Antarvedi to Kannauj to Bihar and Orissa to Afghanistan? Like, not only he's
Okay.
from Kashmir, but he's all around.
See, he had an alliance with, initially, he protected his western border for about 8-9 years. And then he came down with his army. And firstly, the great king of North India was Yashovarman in Kannauj. Kannauj is western UP. So he defeated him. Then he went westwards towards Bengal through Odisha. So he defeated them. And then he went down towards what is Deccan now, or Dakshin. And there was the Rashtrakoot Empire, etc. So he defeated them. And then he went up north through Gujarat and then went back. And he took a total of 14 years on his campaign of conquest. If you can compare it to Alexander from Macedonia, he came to Asia and went back. There was a total of 11 years. Lalitaditya's campaign was 14 years. It was even longer. So he came back 747, and then he was emperor for another 10 years before he passed on. And no, before that, so then what he does is, there's a very interesting geopolitical things going on. The most powerful kingdom north of India at that time was Tibet. Tibet was extremely powerful.
So it was part of India.
No, Tibet was not part of India.
Yeah.
Tibet was an independent kingdom, very powerful. It also ruled over parts of China and Central Asia and so on. And the Tang Empire, which is the Chinese, they were in China, and then they had a small branch coming north of Tibet towards where Gilgit, etc. is, north of Kashmir. So it was an interesting dynamic between three powers: China, Tang Empire, Tibet, and Lalitaditya. And Lalitaditya felt it was better for him to ally with the Tang Chinese because Tibet was a more immediate threat. So he sort of aided Tang, or you could put it the other way around, that the Chinese thought that he was a good ally because he was the powerful thing. And for themselves, for the Chinese, this was very, very far away from the Chinese mainland. So it was an interesting dynamic. And that was the reason why, as the Tang Empire sort of collapsed, and that was the reason why at that time, Lalitaditya felt that he should go and conquer countries or lands near the Taklamakan Desert, which is in Xinjiang, the huge desert, which is called Taklamakan now. So he went there and he conquered parts of it, but it's believed that's where he met his end. It's believed in Kalhan's Rajatarangini, it's also stated that he went up to the northern regions and something happened and everybody died. And so his body was not brought back. He died. So there was some kind of a big catastrophe. Was
Oh.
it snowstorm or was it something else? We don't know.
Mhm. Okay, so let's move to our next question. So basically, you're saying that the Islamic rulers tried to attack India because India was very rich and they wanted to, it kind of grew greed and loot and stuff. But how did Lalitaditya's strategies prevent the attacks from Muslim armies? What did he do? Like for a long time, he kind of prevent these attacks, right? He prevented these attacks.
At that time, the Hindus were dominant, so there was no Muslim. The Muslim incursion only started in Central Asia about 900 or so, and it took them about 100 years to conquer Khotan. As I told you, Khotan was conquered in 1006, and then they came down when Ghaznavi. Ghazni is a small city right now and looks pretty in a sad state. So at that time, there were all these people milling around, and there were also people who had already taken refuge in India because India was so rich. And
Mhm.
India, as you know, is a open country, open society. Anybody can come in. People don't care what your personal belief is, right?
Yeah,
Even now.
Vasudev Kutumbakam.
Kutumbukam.
Yeah.
So there were apparently there were also Turkic people who had come to India or to Kashmir. When Kashmir fell in 1339, what happened was that some of these non-Kashmiri people who had settled in Kashmir as traders or looking for fortune, at the last minute they switched over to the other side
Hmm.
because India is open. You see
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
And so Lalitaditya didn't have to do anything at that time. I mean, India is an open society, so it's not based on race. So there are people of Turkish race or people who are speaking Turkic languages. If they were ruling parts of Afghanistan, that was fine too. And they ultimately, as I told you, they became the famous Hindu Shahi dynasty,
Mhm.
and they may themselves have spoken a Turkish language. Right now, also in Afghanistan, the southern part of Afghanistan speaks Pashto, which is a so-called Aryan language,
Mhm.
and the northern parts they speak Turkish languages. So
Mhm.
it's always been multi-ethnic or multilingual, that whole region.
So you're saying Hindus' kingdoms were quite dominant. At what point in time and what happened that, the Islamic invasion came in and, there was instability all around?
I believe it started after Central Asia, Bukhara, Samarkand, Khotan, etc. They fell. It took about 100 years for them to conquer that. Um, so 1000, and then they pushed further down to Afghanistan and they conquered certain regions. But eventually, Mahmud of Ghazni became dominant about 1000. And there is the other element about slavery, which is extremely important, which you'll see in my article,
Yeah,
The
we
Age of
will do the
Slavery.
next episode on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened was that they, when people converted to Islam, whichever group or tribe,
Mhm.
they could not, and they didn't have enough soldiers
Mhm.
uh, because they wanted to expand. So for them, slavery became a very important element of their statecraft because you could take the Arabs could not take Arabs as slaves, but they could take Turks as slaves.
Mhm.
Now, Turks could take other non-Turks or non-Muslims as slaves. So India was another magnet. Why? Because India was very densely populated. So each time Ghaznavi would come in every summer, and because India was sort of decentralized, you attack a certain part, there's no big army there. You also enslave the population,
Mhm.
and you would bring the people back to the slave bazaars of Central Asia where these were sold, these Indians who had been enslaved were sold as servants, or women were sold as servants or sex slaves, or they could also be taken in by the merchant who took another woman. If she was pretty, maybe he married her. So that was the system. The slave trade was an extremely important element of this expansion. And it was not just the wealth of the people of the temples, that was important, though.
Yeah.
It was also the possibility that each attack you could carry off a lot of people as slaves because they were also worth money. Then you could sell them in the bazaars. And therefore, then the Central Asian people, they had a lot of slaves or servants in their homes.
So it's not only that Britishers took Indians as slaves, it's also the Islamic invaders.
No, the Britishers did not take Indians as slaves.
No,
They
but
only took them as
no,
indentured
they put them in
laborers.
a ship and they have made into Mauritius and then
Oh yeah, but
Connecticut.
okay, no. Let me explain. What happened was when slavery was made illegal. There were many things happening, Enlightenment in Europe or Civil War in USA. So now they couldn't have slaves directly. British are very smart. So they said, okay, we don't believe in slavery, but you will have to sign a contract. We are taking you as laborers. So it was slavery by a different name. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, you
So
said that indentured laborers.
Laborers. That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
the official title because now they could not bring in slaves from Africa to, let's say, the sugar farms, estates in Guyana, in South America, and so they brought in Indians because they were used to doing all of that work. So they brought them men and some women. They brought them to Guyana, or they took them to Mauritius. They needed sugar farms, and so it was slavery by another name. And then after 1947, when Britain lost its empire, they still had factories at that time. Manchester, they didn't have enough people. In the earlier eras, you used to abduct people. These people would go in, abduct people, and make them into slaves or soldiers or whatever else. So what the British did at that time was to come to India and Pakistan and say, okay, there are jobs and you'll have more money. So that's how, after 48, a lot of Indians and Pakistanis and some Bangladeshis came to England as workers in their factories. But eventually, all those factories were shut down because America could not compete with a resurgent Asia, and therefore America or UK, and therefore now these are the people, one of whose descendants is Rishi Sunak.
So yeah, so that's really great. That's amazing. Actually, I want to tell one story. Like, I had one a very big managerial position, and she was from UK, and I said, okay, now Rishi Sunak and is your prime minister. So she says that, oh, he's actually quite British.
In accent,
Yeah.
which of course all the Indians who are being raised in Britain, they speak English with a British accent.
Yeah.
Right?
But he's celebrating Diwali in 10 Downing Street.
Not only that, he also, when he goes to the temple, he says Jai Shri Ram. And he says that very loudly.
Yeah.
Jai Siya Ram. Yeah, says that.
All right. Thank you, sir. It was really an interesting session. Hope my viewers of the Atman Show got a great insight on this topic. And of course, we'll meet with another topic and I'll read your article on medium.com. Do you have anything to say to my viewers of the Atman Show?
Well, keep on watching the Atman Show.
Okay, bye. Namaste.
Okay, bye. Namaste.